So I want to get Mark and John involved in this conversation. You guys were working at other places at that time. It wasn't until right before the IPO and a little bit after the IPO that each of you joined the company, but you were working with the company. Why don't you describe a little bit about what you guys were doing and what eventually brought you to join these crazy guys?
So I met Scott when he was at News Corp MCI, iGuide.
Really?
Yeah, you were my client. And
you made a big impression.
I did. Thank you. That's like, wow, some things don't change. But I was tasked with the day that MCI pulled out, February 14th, I believe, handling the
Valentine's Day, yeah.
Yeah, handling the press along there. So I was working in an agency in Boston and shuttling back and forth between New York and Boston, and I was handling sporting goods and consumer products clients. And then I started to get clients like iGuide, like the company that would become iVillage and the company that would become About. And I was spending half my time in meetings with vice presidents of marketing where I wasn't allowed to talk. I was 25, 26, running their business, but I wasn't allowed to actually say anything. I had to then go back to the office, do all the work, then go sit in the meetings, tell my boss, who would tell her boss, who would tell the client, who would tell the ultimate client. And I had a day in New York. It was actually, I had a meeting with, my client was Rollerblade brand inline skates, right? And we were doing a custom publishing product. And we were at a meeting at 155th Avenue, which was the headquarters at the time of iVillage. And they were my client. And I worked closely with Candace and Nancy and Robert and those guys, like I was working at the time with my clients at the mining company. And I was in this meeting with the vice president of marketing from Rollerblade. Or actually, the CEO was there. And I quite literally was not allowed to open my mouth in the meeting. I was told before we walked in there that I wasn't allowed to talk. The meeting was over, get in the elevator, the CEO of iVillage is there. Hey Mark, how are you? Good to see you. Will we see you on Thursday? I said, absolutely. And then I went to a meeting at 220 East 42nd with these guys where you walked into the room and it was, this is the business, right? Like, what are we going to do and how can you help us? And so it was such a no-brainer for me to run to the opportunity and the culture. And I worked with a lot of the folks who started the company from the outside, and I watched them really jealously for years before I jumped over the balcony. But I did everything I could to get in.
Well, it's interesting because you worked with both iVillage and Mining Co. At that time. And from what I gather, they were very different companies. How would you compare and contrast those two companies?
Well, this one's a lot more fun. No doubt. I think that this was a scrappier group of folks who we were creating something, they were creating something that had never been done before. I always got the sense when I was with iVillage that it felt more traditional. They weren't flying center seat coach. I'm sure they were, but it didn't feel that way. But they were scrappy too. But to me, it felt like innovation and something new. It was a clear difference.
Well, they certainly had more blue chip investors than About, I think.
Oh, God, they had KP.
Yeah.
Oh.
We'll come back to that. And John.
So my experience joining Mining Co. was different. I was working for an advertising agency and hated it because I felt powerless, similar to Mark's.
And how old were you when?
I was 27.
So you're 27, 25. And Bill, how old were you when you were at Mine?
What year? 96? Let's see if we do math.
12.
30?
Right.
30? Yes, 32.
Okay. And Sue Berkowitz, who worked at theglobe.com, called me and said, Michelle James.
By the way, that's a name.
Yeah, Michelle James from Korn Ferry is going to call you. There's this company, miningco.com, that needs a CMO or head of marketing. You got to get in there. You got to get into that. And I met Michelle, went and saw Scott, and Scott, the interview was, tell me your life story. I will never forget it. Tell me your life story, which I told him, and then what are the 10 things wrong with my business, and what will you do to fix them? That was the interview.
And you had done your homework.
I had 10. Like I went.
John did better homework than for anybody who ever wanted to work with me than I've ever seen.
I had a plan, and so I remember I went downstairs and called my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and said I didn't get it because I told them what I really thought, and that was it.